April 6th, 1945. Singapore Harbor. A single B-29 Superfortress circles at 18,000 feet, its bomb bay doors open. Below, the Japanese cruiser Takao sits moored in the King George VI graving dock, one of the largest dry docks in Southeast Asia. The ship survived Pearl Harbor. It survived the Battle of Leyte Gulf. It has weathered 3 years of Allied bombing raids. In 17 seconds, none of that will matter. The bombardier releases a single bomb. One bomb. Not a stick of explosives. Not a carpet of incendiaries. One 22,000-pound projectile that doesn't need to hit the ship to destroy it. It doesn't even need to hit the dock. It just needs to hit the ground nearby. The weapon that ended the Takao's war looked like something dreamed up by a mad scientist who'd been given unlimited funding and told to ignore every rule of conventional bombing. At 11 tons, it was the heaviest operational bomb ever built by Allied forces during World War II. It was so large that it could only be carried by specially modified bombers. So expensive that each one cost more than a fighter plane. So ridiculous in concept that when American bomber crews first saw it, they assumed someone had made a catastrophic mistake in the requisition paperwork. This was the tall boy, the earthquake bomb, the weapon that proved you didn't need to hit something to completely destroy it. By 1943, the Allied bombing campaign faced a strategic crisis that conventional explosives simply could not solve. German U-boat pens on the French coast were protected by reinforced concrete roofs up to 23 feet thick. V-weapon launch sites were buried underground. Critical infrastructure like railway bridges, viaducts, and ship facilities were built to withstand direct hits from standard ordnance. Bomber Command was dropping thousands of tons of explosives with marginal results. The problem was simple physics. Conventional bombs relied on direct contact and explosive force. A 2,000-pound general-purpose bomb might penetrate a few feet of concrete before detonating. The explosion would crater the surface, damage the structure, perhaps kill personnel. But the target would survive. Repairs would take days or weeks, not months. The infrastructure remained operational. Strategic bombing was becoming a war of attrition that the Allies could not afford to lose. Existing solutions had proven inadequate. Incendiary bombs were useless against hardened targets. Armor-piercing bombs lacked the mass to penetrate thick fortifications. Blockbuster bombs created impressive surface damage, but couldn't reach deep defenses. The British experimented with massive 12,000-pound tall boy bombs in 1944, but even these struggled against the most hardened targets. The American modification of this concept for Pacific operations required something even more extreme. Something that could reach targets the British tall boy couldn't. Something that could destroy not just fortified positions, but entire port facilities, dry docks, and underground complexes with a single hit. The specification seemed impossible. A bomb weighing over 10 tons, dropped from 18,000 feet, traveling at near supersonic speeds at impact, penetrating up to 100 feet underground before detonating, creating an artificial earthquake that would liquefy soil, crack bedrock, and collapse structures from below. Engineers needed to invent an entirely new category of weapon. They called it a seismic bomb. History would call it the earthquake bomb. The solution came from an unlikely source, Barnes Wallis, the British aeronautical engineer famous for inventing the bouncing bomb used in the Dam Busters raid. But Wallis wasn't just a creative inventor. He was a rigorous mathematician who understood that the key to destroying hardened targets wasn't more explosive. It was physics. Specifically, the physics of deep earth penetration and seismic shock. Wallis's insight was counterintuitive. Instead of maximizing explosive payload, he maximized kinetic energy. A conventional bomb might carry 50% explosive filler. Wallis designed the tall boy with just 42% explosive, 5,200 pounds of Torpex, with the rest being steel casing. That casing wasn't just protective, it was ballistic. The bomb was shaped like a massive rifle bullet, 21 feet long, 38 inches in diameter, with a streamlined nose and stabilizing tail fins. This wasn't a bomb in the traditional sense. It was a projectile designed to convert altitude into Earth-penetrating velocity. When dropped from 18,000 feet, the tall boy would accelerate to 750 miles per hour, just below the speed of sound. At impact, its kinetic energy was equivalent to a freight train hitting a concrete wall at highway speed. The streamlined casing would punch through soil, rock, and concrete, not by explosive force, but by sheer momentum. Wallace calculated that the bomb could penetrate up to 130 feet underground in soft earth or punch through 16 feet of reinforced concrete before the fuse triggered detonation. The detonation itself was the second innovation. By exploding deep underground, the tall boy created what Wallace called a camouflet, a massive underground cavity. The explosion vaporized surrounding material, creating a temporary void up to 100 feet in diameter. When this cavity collapsed milliseconds later, it generated a seismic shock wave that propagated through the earth like an earthquake. This shock wave was what destroyed the target. The mathematics were elegant. A surface explosion dissipates energy in all directions, with most force escaping into the atmosphere. An underground explosion channels energy through the denser medium of earth and rock, creating compression waves that travel farther and hit harder. When these waves encountered structures, foundation walls, support columns, buried bunkers, they induced catastrophic vibrations. Concrete cracked. Steel flexed beyond its elastic limit. Underground facilities collapsed inward. And critically, there was no defense against it. You couldn't armor plate against an earthquake. The engineering challenges were substantial. Manufacturing a one-piece forged steel casing 21 feet long required specialized industrial capability. The bomb body had to be perfectly balanced and aerodynamically stable. Any wobble during the 30-second drop would reduce accuracy. The tail fins had to withstand supersonic airflow. The fusing mechanism had to survive impact deceleration of hundreds of Gs before triggering at the correct depth. American engineers took Wallace's British design and pushed it further. The American-manufactured tallboys were slightly modified for B-29 compatibility, requiring new bomb shackles, reinforced bomb bay structures, and modified loading equipment. Each bomb required its own specialized handling cart and crane system. Loading time exceeded 2 hours, but once loaded, the B-29 could carry this monster to targets the British Lancaster couldn't reach. The weapon system came with strict operational parameters. Dropping altitude, minimum 18,000 feet to achieve necessary terminal velocity. Drop angle, perfectly level to ensure ballistic stability. Target conditions, preferably soil or sedimentary rock for maximum penetration. Weather, clear visibility for precision bombing. These weren't suggestions. Deviation meant the weapon wouldn't work as designed. Manufacturing earthquake bombs pushed American industrial capacity to its limits. Each tallboy required 8,500 pounds of forged steel for the casing alone, more steel than a Jeep. The casting had to cool slowly over weeks to prevent stress fractures. Any imperfection could cause the bomb to tumble in flight or shatter on impact. Quality control rejected approximately 15% of castings. Production began in late 1944 at specialized facilities capable of handling the extreme metallurgical requirements. The total production run remains disputed. Estimates range from 800 to 1,200 American-manufactured tallboys. Records indicate that fewer than 100 were deployed to the Pacific Theater before Japan's surrender, with most remaining in European operations. For Pacific deployment, tallboys were shipped to forward airfields in India, China, and eventually the Mariana Islands as bases became available. Each bomb required its own wooden crate and specialized transport. The 21-foot length meant standard cargo aircraft couldn't accommodate them. They traveled by ship or heavy cargo plane, often consuming cargo capacity equivalent to a dozen standard bombs. Bombardier training for tallboy operations was extensive. Standard bombing techniques didn't apply. The bombardier had to account for the bomb's unique ballistics. It didn't fall like a conventional weapon, but flew like a descending aircraft. Crosswinds at 18,000 feet would push it off target. The bombardier needed to release at exactly the right moment, accounting for the aircraft's speed, altitude, atmospheric conditions, and the 30-second drop time. Miss by 2 seconds. Miss the target by 300 feet. At that cost per bomb, misses weren't acceptable. If you're finding this interesting, a quick subscribe helps more than you know. The most dramatic demonstration of the earthquake bomb's effectiveness came on April 6, 1945, when Royal Air Force Lancaster bombers, operating in the Pacific alongside American forces, targeted the Japanese cruiser Takao in Singapore's King George VI graving dock. The Takao represented a valuable target. The heavy cruiser had survived multiple major engagements, including the Battle of Leyte Gulf, where it took torpedo damage. Now under repair in one of the largest dry docks in Southeast Asia, it was theoretically safe from conventional attack. The dry dock itself was a fortress, massive concrete walls, steel gates, and depths that made it nearly invulnerable to standard ordnance. The mission plan called for precision bombing with tall boys. Squadron leader J.B. Willis Lancaster approached from 14,000 feet, lower than ideal but necessitated by cloud cover. At 09:43 hours, the bombardier released a single tall boy. The bomb plummeted for 26 seconds. It did not hit the Takao. It did not hit the dry dock. It struck the ground approximately 50 feet from the dock's northern wall. What happened next validated everything Barnes-Wallis had calculated. The tall boy penetrated approximately 95 feet underground before detonating. The explosion created a massive camouflage directly beneath the dock's foundation. When the cavity collapsed, it generated a seismic shock wave that radiated outward through the surrounding earth. The dry dock's foundation, designed to withstand surface bombardment, had no defense against subsurface seismic attack. The results were catastrophic. The northern wall of the dry dock cracked from top to bottom. The floor buckled upward. Water rushed in through breached walls and fractured seals. The Takao, sitting inside, sustained damage not from fragments or blast pressure, but from the dock itself collapsing around it. The ship settled deeper as the dock floor gave way. Within hours, the entire facility was flooded and operationally destroyed. The strategic impact exceeded the physical damage. The King George VI graving dock was out of commission for the remainder of the war. The Takao would never sail again. It remained partially submerged when Japan surrendered 4 months later. More significantly, the attack demonstrated that no harbor, no dock, no fortified coastal installation was safe from earthquake bombs. The psychological effect on Japanese naval planners was severe. If Singapore's premier dry dock could be destroyed by a single bomb, no repair facility in the Pacific was secure. Additional tallboy missions in the Pacific theater targeted submarine pens, port facilities, and hardened installations with similar success. At Penang, Malaysia, earthquake bombs collapsed underground storage facilities that had resisted months of conventional bombing. Near Hong Kong, a single tallboy strike destroyed a coastal artillery position by triggering a landslide that buried the entire installation. The operational reports reveal a pattern. Tallboys didn't need direct hits. Near misses were often as effective as direct strikes because the seismic effect propagated through the ground. A conventional bomb placed 50 feet from a target might cause minor damage. A tallboy placed 50 feet from a target would collapse its foundation and induce structural failure. The weapon redefined the concept of bombing accuracy. The earthquake bomb concept was uniquely British in origin, but the Americans adapted and employed it with characteristic scale and efficiency. Understanding how it compared to other nations' approaches reveals why it was so revolutionary. German bombing doctrine never pursued earthquake weapons. The Luftwaffe focused on tactical bombing and anti-ship operations, developing specialized weapons like the Fritz X guided bomb and H-293 glide bomb. These weapons emphasized precision guidance over mass and penetration. The heaviest German bombs were the 2,500 Kiloton Max bombs, impressive but still in the conventional explosive category. German engineering philosophy prioritized accuracy in guidance systems rather than kinetic penetration. Without Barnes-Wallace's mathematical insight into camouflage effects, German bomb designers never attempted to weaponize seismic shock. American bombing philosophy traditionally favored mass production and volume. The standard American approach was to drop many bombs from many aircraft, accepting that most would miss, but ensuring enough hits to destroy the target. The B-17 and B-29 were designed to carry multiple 500 to 2,000-pound bombs, not single massive projectiles. The tall boy represented a British influence on American strategy, precision deep penetration weapons that required modification of American bombers and tactics. The most direct American equivalent to the tall boy was the M110 semi-armor piercing bomb and the later T-12 earthquake bomb. The T-12 Cloudmaker, developed late in the war, was essentially an American super tall boy, 43,000 pounds, 25 feet long, filled with 17,000 pounds of explosive. Only one was ever dropped operationally, against a viaduct in Germany in March 1945. It missed. Production never scaled beyond experimental quantities because the war ended before full deployment. The comparison reveals strategic philosophies. British bombing, constrained by limited industrial capacity, developed weapons that maximized effect per sortie. American bombing, backed by massive industrial output, initially relied on quantity over individual weapon capability. The tall boy represented a convergence, British innovation adopted by American force, combining precision engineering with American production capacity and long-range delivery capability. Specification comparison illustrates the tall boy's unique position. British tall boy, 21 feet long, $12,000. Pounds, 5,200 pounds. Torpex explosive. Terminal velocity, 715 pi. Penetration up to 130 feet in earth or 16 feet of concrete. American T-12 Cloudmaker, 25 feet long, 43,000 pounds. 17,000 pounds explosive designed for 30,000-foot drops. Theoretical penetration exceeding 200 feet. Never operationally proven. Standard American GP bombs, 500, 2,000 pounds. Penetration 1 to 3 feet of concrete. Surface or shallow detonation. German SC-2500, Max, 5,500 pounds. Thin-walled general-purpose bomb, surface blast focus. The tall boy occupied a strategic niche no other weapon filled effectively. Too expensive and specialized for general use. Absolutely necessary for hardened targets. The Americans used approximately 80-100 tall boys in the Pacific Theater, a tiny fraction of total tonnage dropped, but disproportionately effective against specific high-value targets. The earthquake bomb was not perfect. Its limitations were substantial and constrained operational use throughout the war. First, production cost and complexity. Each tall boy cost approximately $15,000 in 1945 dollars, equivalent to roughly $250,000 today. For comparison, a B-29 Superfortress cost $640,000. You could buy a fighter plane for the price of 4 tall boys. This economic reality meant earthquake bombs were reserved for only the highest value targets. Commanders had to justify every single use. Second, delivery platform constraints. Only the British Lancaster and the American B-29 could carry a tall boy, and even then with extensive modifications. The B-29 had to have strengthened bomb shackles, reinforced bomb bay doors, and modified loading equipment. Fuel capacity decreased to account for the weight. Range suffered. A B-29 carrying a tall boy couldn't carry auxiliary fuel tanks or defensive gunners in some positions. The aircraft became a specialized delivery vehicle. Third, accuracy requirements. The tall boy's effectiveness depended on penetrating deep underground before detonation. This required near vertical drops from high altitude. But high-altitude precision bombing was notoriously difficult. Wind at 18,000 feet could push a bomb hundreds of feet off course. Cloud cover prevented visual targeting. If the bombardier released even 2 seconds early or late, the bomb would miss the optimal impact point. Early missions showed accuracy rates below 40%. Fourth, target selection limitations. Earthquake bombs worked best against targets over soil or sedimentary rock. Hard bedrock prevented deep penetration. Very soft soil absorbed energy. The ideal target was a hardened structure built over intermediate density soil, exactly the conditions at Singapore Harbor. But many strategic targets didn't meet these geological criteria. An underground bunker built into granite bedrock wouldn't experience camouflage effects as dramatically as one built over river delta soil. Fifth, fusing reliability. The fusing mechanism had to survive impact forces exceeding 500 Gs and detonate at the correct depth. Underground. Early fuse occasionally failed. The bomb would penetrate deep but not detonate, essentially wasting a $15,000 projectile. Later in the war, fuse reliability improved to above 95%, but early missions suffered from frustrating dude rates. Despite these limitations, the earthquake bomb's legacy proved enduring. Post-war analysis showed that seismic penetration weapons destroyed more hardened targets per bomb than any other Allied ordnance. The concept influenced Cold War bunker buster development, leading to weapons like the GBU-28 and GBU-57 Moab-E, modern earthquake bombs using GPS guidance and even more sophisticated penetration capabilities. The original tallboys saw limited post-war use. Several were expended in ordnance disposal testing. Others remained in storage until scrapped. A few survive in museums, including examples at the Royal Air Force Museum in London and the Imperial War Museum. These 12,000-pound artifacts remain impressive. Visitors consistently underestimate the size until standing next to one. The strategic lesson proved more lasting than the hardware. You don't always need more explosive. Sometimes you need smarter physics. You don't always need to hit the target directly. Sometimes you need to destroy it from below. You don't always need quantity. Sometimes one precisely delivered weapon achieves what 1,000 conventional bombs cannot. April 6, 1945. Singapore Harbor. A single tallboy drops from 14,000 feet. It misses the Japanese cruiser Takao by 50 feet and still destroys everything. The earthquake bomb represented the perfect synthesis of mathematical insight, engineering precision, and strategic thinking. Barnes-Wallis calculated that deep underground explosions could create artificial earthquakes. British engineers built a weapon that could penetrate 100 feet underground. American industry manufactured them. Allied bombers delivered them, and the weapon performed exactly as the mathematics predicted. 11 tons of forged steel and torpex dropped from 3 miles up, traveling at 3/4 the speed of sound, penetrating deeper underground than a 10-story building is tall, detonating with enough force to vaporize a 100-foot cavity, creating a seismic shock wave that collapsed fortifications designed to withstand direct hits. One bomb, one target, mission accomplished. That was Barnes-Wallis's genius. That was British engineering. That was American industrial capability. That was how you destroy something too hard to crack from the surface. You make the earth itself swallow it whole.